The text message arrived at 6:17 in the morning, just as the sun painted the hospital parking lot in soft shades of gold. 3 simple words shattered everything he had planned. Don't wait for me. No explanation. No promises. No goodbye. Only a final sentence beneath those words. Live your life, Rowan. For 5 years, Rowan Vale read that message every year on the same date, wondering how someone who once felt like home could disappear without looking back. And on the morning of his wedding day, when he believed he had finally buried the past, he looked up and saw her standing at the back of the chapel. If you believe kindness deserves second chances and that some people leave our lives for reasons we don't understand until much later, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Hub for more heart-touching stories that remind us how deeply human we all are. 5 years earlier, Rowan was 29 and worked as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center in Portland. His days were spent helping accident victims learn to walk again, encouraging elderly patients recovering from surgeries, and celebrating tiny victories that most people would never notice. That was where he met Maris Calder. She worked across the street at St. Agnes Medical Center as an emergency room nurse. Their schedules were impossible. His mornings began before sunrise. Her nights often ended long after dawn. Yet somehow, they found each other in the spaces between exhaustion. They shared rushed breakfasts at a small coffee shop near the hospital. They sent voice messages during lunch breaks. They sat together in silence on park benches after difficult shifts, too tired for conversation but comforted by each other's presence. Maris had a laugh that arrived unexpectedly, usually after the hardest days. Rowan admired the way she remembered every patient's name, even after 12-hour shifts. She carried kindness like it was part of her heartbeat. But she also carried something else. Weight. Invisible, crushing weight. At first, Rowan thought it was ordinary exhaustion. Emergency nurses lived under impossible pressure. He understood that. Then came the sleepless nights. The forgotten meals. The distant stares. The way her hands trembled after work. Some evenings, she sat in his apartment without speaking, staring out the window as if her thoughts were somewhere unreachable. The emergency department had become unbearable. Staff shortages stretched every shift beyond its limits. The endless cycle of trauma, loss, and impossible choices chipped away at her spirit one day at a time. Maris stopped talking about her patients because carrying their stories home hurt too much. Yet keeping them inside hurt even more. Rowan tried everything he knew. He cooked dinner. He left encouraging notes in her bag. He convinced her to take weekend trips to the coast. He listened without trying to fix things. Still, he watched the woman he loved slowly disappear behind a wall of exhaustion. One rainy afternoon, after she had worked nearly 70 hours that week, Maris fell asleep at their favorite cafe. Not for a few seconds. For almost an hour. When she woke up, tears filled her eyes before she even realized where she was. That was the first time Rowan understood this was more than burnout. It was survival. The following months grew harder. Maris began missing family gatherings. She stopped answering messages from friends. She canceled plans because she couldn't find the energy to leave her apartment. The vibrant woman who once danced barefoot in kitchen socks now struggled to get through each day. Rowan asked her to move in with him. Not because he wanted to save her. Because he wanted her to know she didn't have to carry everything alone. For a while, things improved. They established routines. Morning walks. Shared dinners. Phone-free evenings. Small moments of peace. Then winter arrived, and the emergency department was overwhelmed. Flu season collided with staffing shortages. Patients filled hallways. Nurses worked double shifts. Maris changed. Her smile became rare. Her laughter disappeared completely. One night, Rowan woke to find her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying silently into her hands. She finally admitted what she had hidden for months. She was drowning. She didn't recognize herself anymore. She couldn't remember the last time she felt joy. And she was terrified that one day, Rowan would realize she was too broken to love. He held her until sunrise and promised her she would never have to face it alone. But sometimes love isn't enough to silence the battles happening inside someone's mind. A week later, Maris asked for space. Not because she stopped loving him. Because she believed he deserved someone lighter. Someone whole. Someone who didn't need saving. Rowan disagreed. He fought for them. He reminded her of every difficult season they had survived. But pain has a way of convincing people they are burdens instead of human beings. 3 days later, he received the message. Don't wait for me. Live your life. Then she vanished. Her phone number changed. Her apartment lease ended. Even mutual friends didn't know where she had gone. Months passed. Then years. Rowan learned through an old coworker that Maris had left nursing altogether. Beyond that, nothing. At first, he searched endlessly. Eventually, grief transformed into acceptance. Not complete acceptance. Just enough to keep moving. He focused on work. He earned certifications. He volunteered at rehabilitation programs for injured veterans. He built a life around helping others heal because he understood what brokenness felt like. 2 years after Maris left, he met Elena Mercer. She was an elementary school music teacher with patient eyes and a calming presence. Unlike the whirlwind intensity of his relationship with Maris, loving Elena felt steady. Safe. She never asked him to forget his past. Instead, she gave him space to carry it honestly. When he told her about Maris, she listened without jealousy. Everyone has unfinished chapters, she said. What matters is whether you keep reading. Over time, Rowan fell in love again. Not because he forgot. Because life kept moving. Because healing doesn't erase old wounds. It teaches us how to live beside them. When he proposed to Elena beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The wedding arrived on a bright spring morning. Sunlight streamed through the chapel windows while guests filled the wooden pews. Rowan adjusted his tie and smiled nervously at his reflection. For the first time in years, the old message no longer hurt. He was ready. Or at least he believed he was. Then, moments before the ceremony began, he glanced toward the back of the chapel. And everything stopped. Maris stood quietly near the entrance. Her dark hair was shorter now. There were faint lines around her eyes that hadn't existed 5 years earlier. But it was unmistakably her. She looked healthier. Stronger. Yet her expression carried years of unspoken words. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she offered a small, uncertain smile. Not a smile asking for another chance. Just gratitude. Rowan stepped outside the chapel where she waited beneath a flowering maple tree. Neither spoke immediately. 5 years of silence hung between them. Finally, Maris broke it. After leaving Portland, she moved across the country to stay with her aunt. She entered an intensive treatment program for severe depression and occupational trauma. She spent months learning how to sleep again. How to eat regularly. How to exist without feeling responsible for everyone's pain. Eventually, she returned to school and became a counselor specializing in healthcare worker burnout. For years, she wanted to contact Rowan. But shame kept stopping her. She feared reopening wounds she had caused. When a former coworker mentioned his upcoming wedding, she almost stayed away. Almost. But she needed him to know one thing. Leaving had never been about a lack of love. It had been about survival. At her lowest point, she genuinely believed she would destroy the people who cared about her most. So she ran. Not because Rowan wasn't enough. Because she no longer knew how to save herself. Tears filled Rowan's eyes as years of unanswered questions finally found meaning. He realized he had spent so long wondering why she left that he never considered how much pain it must have taken to walk away. Maris apologized for disappearing. For the silence. For leaving him to carry confusion instead of truth. Rowan nodded slowly. The hurt had been real. The loss had been devastating. But standing before him now was not the woman who left. This was someone who had fought her way back from darkness. Someone who had survived. And somehow, understanding replaced resentment. Forgiveness arrived quietly. Not because the pain didn't matter. Because carrying it forever no longer did. When the chapel doors opened and music drifted outside, Maris smiled gently. She told him Elena was lucky. Then she handed him a small envelope. Inside was the photograph they had taken years earlier on the Oregon coast. On the back, she had written a single sentence. "Thank you for loving me when I couldn't love myself." If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Hub. Your support helps these stories of hope and healing reach people who may need them most today. Special request, comment, healing takes time, if you believe everyone deserves compassion during their hardest seasons. Rowan returned to the chapel with tears in his eyes but peace in his heart. When Elena saw him, she didn't ask questions immediately. She simply took his hands. Later that evening, after the ceremony, he told her everything. Every word. Every emotion. Elena listened the same way she always had. With kindness. With understanding. With love. Some people enter our lives for a season. Others stay for a lifetime. And sometimes, the people we lose don't return to reclaim the past. They return to help us understand it. Maris wasn't Rowan's unfinished love story. She was proof that healing is not linear. That invisible battles deserve visible compassion. That walking away can sometimes be an act of survival rather than rejection. And that closure doesn't always arrive when we want it to. Sometimes it arrives 5 years later, on a bright spring morning, just before we begin a new chapter. As Rowan and Elena danced beneath strings of warm lights that evening, he silently thanked the woman standing briefly at the back of the chapel. Not for leaving. Not for the pain. But for finding her way back long enough to say goodbye properly. Because some endings aren't meant to break us. They're meant to set us free. And perhaps the greatest act of kindness is understanding that people aren't always fighting against us. Sometimes, they're fighting battles we cannot see. And when they finally find their way home to themselves, forgiveness becomes the bridge that allows everyone to move forward.